Hello and welcome to this podcast. In this one, Myzrael had a great idea on our subject, and it's related to the recent finish of the Arcane series.
Hello. My name is Myzrael. As probably all of you, I am a big fan of Arcane. Just that just that just had its finale, and today, because of this, we decided to discuss about the state of Britover zone in expeditions, and also about how it works to draft this region, what cards should you aim for, how should you play, and also what do we like to potentially change in the expeditions about Britover zone, and also we're gonna discuss characters from Arcane, the ones that we can find in expeditions. We are talking about Vi, Jinx, Caitlyn, Heimerdinger, Ekko, and Viktor. And I'm excited about the discussion, especially about the discussion of, especially about the moment when Piltover Enforcer will be on the scene. But how about you guys? How about you, Arthur? What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is a good idea. I've watched Arcane as well, and I think it's brilliant. So I think it's a great jump-off point to talk about one of the regions within the Runeterra expeditions.
Maybe for our viewers, as a first introduction, we don't plan to spoil like too much. We might give some hints. I personally didn't see it yet, but I don't care being spoiled at this point because I was just too lazy to watch it in time. But we said beforehand that we don't want to include any major spoilers into this video, so you can safely watch it even if you didn't finish Arcane yet.
Yes, it's possible that all the spoilers are past this point. That we're gonna spoil which characters are actually in Arcane from Legends of Frontera, like in this opening.
Where we said Timo is not in. Like that's very disappointing. However,
I
let's
know you really like Timo, so
he's my highest mastery champion by far in PNC. But
mine is Poppy, so viewers are probably gonna hate me now.
he's not in PNC, so Poppy is not a PNC
Yeah,
champion. So
I mean, I meant that Timo is your highest in general, not only PNZ
no, in
highest.
general it's Poppy now as well. I have her in Mastery 5 now,
Okay,
like just playing Banditry and Constructed, but like
okay.
we're getting on different subjects here. So back to PNC, back to the actual discussion. Maybe we start with some raw stats. How good is PNC in expeditions, Arthur?
So according to Lore Guardian for the Expedition Insight, PNZ is currently seventh in terms of win rate. So there's 10 regions overall, the highest at the moment win rate being Demacia and the lowest being Bilgewater. And seventh puts it at about 54% win rate, which is slightly lower than average because the Lore Guardian tracks people who play a bit higher than 50%. So it's probably a little bit below average, but still certainly winnable with them.
Yeah, this is exactly the position that I would suspect from PNZ, thinking that there are some regions that are clearly better, like Demacia, Bubble City, or Noxus. I also think that you should prioritize picking like Shurima or Shadow Isles before picking PNZ, and this is the position probably when I would place PNZ myself. Just from my experience, I would say that it's like the sixth right now region for me.
Yeah, I think Timo is still really strong because you have such a mid-range meta, and Timo is very strong against mid-range as one of the only viable combo decks. And in general, the main reason PNC is not that great right now in expeditions is because it's one of the bad stats regions. I separated like all of these regions into good stats and bad stats, and Piltover is one of the four regions with bad stats. Instead, they try to make it up with combo cards, with elusive, with direct damage, and are a great support region, but don't really carry on their own. They have cards like Mystic Shot, which fit in every deck, no matter if it's aggressive or more defensive, more controlish. They have like landmarks like Hexcore Foundry that basically only go into one archetype, and as we will see in the pools later on, I just don't think any of these are very overpowered right now.
Yeah, I
That,
agree with that. And being expeditions, stats really do matter. If you can curve out with some strong followers that are just fit well along the curve, then you'll do very well. But PNZ is kind of the opposite about that. It's more about synergy, trying to find combos with its spells and utility creatures. So it's a bit harder to put together in expeditions, but it is still highly rewarding when it works.
Exactly.
that's true. That's true. PNZ have some pretty good cards, but they are mostly not minions. I really like Mystic Shot or Thermogenic Beam. This is cards that I like to include in my decks. And also, I just recently had went to 6 with a really strange deck that had Vi and 2 other Piltover cards, and all of the rest of the deck was Shurima, because there was no like good cool buckets to pick during the draft, and I just went almost mono Shurima with just one Vi pick at the beginning.
Yeah, very interesting. I think Vi is like the best champion, like standalone. You can slot in any deck. All of the other PNC champions need a certain amount of build around. I mean, Caitlyn can be played as a 3-mana 3/3, but all the other ones are not that strong. You just slap them into a random deck.
That's true. That's true. That's true. I would also say that this one close champion to that, also like Viktor, could be slammed into many decks because he scales by himself. There is no need to like really big build around. But this is mostly true what you said, actually.
Another thing I noticed about PNC is that many of the followers actually need some time or some place on the board to not be removed and to get the main value. We have the augment mechanic with the armed gearhead and the ballistic bot, both of which are underwhelming at first but can get stronger when they stick around. There's the Tyrian Sandburger build around that if you assemble multiples you get this really overpowered elusive unit. And Puffcap Peddler is one of the most notorious if I stay on the board I win the game cards. Because in expeditions decks are only 36 cards, so Puffcaps are way more effective and way more powerful than in constructed. Would you describe this as a region identity, like cards that have like auras or effects on the board?
Or like being situational. This is kind of the thing, because these cards are just situational, and this is true for the cards that are like cheaper when you draw them, like Python Wardens or Sudap or Gotcha. This is like how would I describe these cards? Situational.
I wouldn't say the situation is that hard to achieve. Like a Gotcha, for example, is still playable in expeditions even for 4 mana, and if you have to for 2 mana, it's great. It can blow your opponent out, but if you just play for 4, it's not the end of the world. I wouldn't say it's a situational card. Would be more like a Lure of the Depths, for example. It's like a build around card that you really need to be in one archetype for. And I would say these cards are like a little bit weaker up front, but if you work for them, if you can enable them, they are a little bit stronger. Maybe this is just what situational means, but
I think the fact that a lot of these cards are utility cards, but then PNZ actually tries to split itself up into very many archetypes is a problem with it, one of the weaknesses, in that PNZ tries to go for spells, it tries to go for traps, it tries to go for targeting, it tries to go to augmentation, it tries to go for draw, it tries to go for predict. And when it has so many different archetypes, and in expeditions, you can't reliably go down one archetype, you'll end up kind of spreading yourself too thin, and you'll end up playing a lot of synergy cards that don't actually synergize with other cards from other archetypes. And I think that's kind of a problem.
Yes, I fully agree with that. This is why Demacia, Bundle City, or Noxus are really good, because they are consistent in their game plan. It's if you have many game plans and you have offered different cards from different game plans each week, it's really hard to make a consistent deck.
yeah, that's true. And I really like the bucket system for that, because at least you can have some consistency. If you had like a fully random system like Arena in Hearthstone, we would just like see Po can in the first pack, then a puff cap card in the next one, and then a predict card. And this wouldn't just make any sense, but at least with these buckets you can have some sort of consistency. Of course, there are wild picks and stuff, but yeah, I would say the Master is very consistent, maybe more consistent because it's just the mid-range region, and mid-range is just like the most easily achievable archetype. And these weird combo decks or aggressive decks are way harder to pull off and to get consistently. And if you don't get all the synergies together, you just play like weird cards. For example, the Insider Knowledge, the 3-mana all players draw 2 is just a terrible card if you don't have like full puff cap synergy. And there are a lot of cards like this. The Assembly Board just the 1 mana if you don't have enough spells. And
yeah, exactly. This is exactly what Arthur said. Cards that are not great by its own. They need archetype to work well, and then there is a lot of archetypes you cannot fully have reliable build of one archetype.
I had a little bit of a problem like classifying PNC as a region. Would you say it's more of a fast region or a slower region? Because like in Constructed, we always see like these slower decks splashing PNC with these Mystic Shots and removal spells like the Draven Scion or Draven Ezreal back then. But from looking at the cards, I don't really see it as a slow region, but not as a super fast region as well, because like Augment wouldn't make sense in a super fast region. But I put it like in the middle. This is like a flexible region. It can be very fast, it can be more controlish. What do you think about that classification?
I think that's fair. I think one way to look at that would be to look at the mana curve of the region throughout. And I mean, I haven't done the kind of that curving myself. Maybe Conan, you have that kind of information a bit more to hand. But I would expect that, unlike, for example, Freljord or Shadow Isles, it doesn't have the very expensive cards that you would expect out of Control region. So I wouldn't say it's Control. Whereas on the other hand, I don't know if it has the massive 1-drops, 2-drops either, where it has aggro. I personally prefer taking a proactive approach in expeditions anyway, so I would probably build PNC a bit more on the aggro end of mid-range. But overall, yeah, I think aggro mid-range sits about right for PNC. It really depends on the archetype that you're trying to follow. So.
I looked at the key keywords of PNC, and they are Augment, Elusive, and Quick Attack. And both Elusive and Quick Attack only make sense if they are like, if you are actively attacking, and Augment also just buffs your attack, so that would put it more into like aggressive for me. And most of these epic cards, especially in expeditions, most of the expensive cards are epics. That's what I meant to say. And others are just like bad stats, like Furious Failfolk, for example, or Unlicensed Innovation. Those are not really like late game cards that really win you the game. I think the most value card would be like Chief Mechanist Savvy and University of Piltover, but both of these are quite random.
I don't really like classifying regions, but which ones are slower and which ones are faster. It's more about builds and champions, honestly, because even in the Piltover you have like Jinx, which is really aggressive champion, and you have like Heimerdinger, that is a slow champion, more of a controlly one. So it's really hard to classify. Even when we try to look for the curve, there are cards like Production Search or Thermogenic Beam, and how do we classify these cards? Thermogenic Beam is a control card, but it can be a cheap removal for an aggro deck also in some cases. So it's really hard to do some kind of classification. I personally think it's a little slower region because most of the champions are like slower variants of gameplay, like Ezreal, like Teemo, Caitlyn, Viktor, or Heimerdinger. They're all like more slower approach, and both Jace and Vi can work also in a slower approach deck. So I would classify it as a little slower region than like on the slower end of mid-range.
But like maybe there are really low amount of low cost champions if you go by that, and like 3 is like not really average for champions. I didn't actually do the calculation, but there are only like 3 1-cost champions and like 5 2-cost champions. So like 3 to 4 is like average, and I wouldn't say Heimerdinger is really designed or was designed to be a big control card in the first place. It was more like a play a lot of spells and get a big board, and then you can attack them with it. But if you compare Heimerdinger to like an Anivia, for example, which isn't a control card, or even to like a Lysandra, they are just way better because they give you value even if they get removed. They have a real late game plan that immediately wins the game, or pretty close to it, and they don't just like generate random stuff.
Yeah, I didn't say Heimerdinger is good. I said just he's slow.
Maybe you didn't know from the design of Heimerdinger, the 3-cost turret used to be elusive, and the 6-cost turret used to be fearsome. And those actually changed before, so by design, Heimerdinger would make a lot of cheap elusives very fast by just playing 3-cost spells.
Yeah, that's true. That would be pretty aggressive strategy. But still, being only for half is not a great idea for a slow strategy, for a fast strategy.
For fast or for a slow strategy, I think it's more more hurting for a slow strategy because you actually want to keep your engines alive. For a fast strategy, you just want to throw stuff at them.
If you're playing slow strategy and Heimerdinger is just a threat and not a key point to victory, like in a slow strategy that I would imagine, and probably most of the strategies that Piltover gonna do, like champion is just one threat in a big build of a deck. Heimerdinger, in my envision, would be just one threat in a control deck, like together with, for example, Lux being the Grand Moments control deck.
Very interesting. Yes. So
I see him.
Arthur?
Maybe we'll go into that when we actually go to
exactly. Yeah, but like, is there anything you want to add on the region in general? So, like, I would say it's still very aggressive. If you look at this game, not like it's designed to be more aggressive with the elusive and quick attack. And like I would say, the really aggressive regions are Ionia and Noxus. And then we have mid-range as Shurima, Targon, and Demacia. Maybe Bandle City is like in between. And then PNC is like the flexible, and the slow regions are Freljord and Shadow Isles. This is what I maybe I forgot Bilgewater, but it's definitely not as slow as Freljord and Shadow Isles in my opinion.
Yeah, I would therefore say that Freljord and Shadow Isles are slower regions than PNZ.
Do you disagree, Arthur, or?
No, I agree. I think Freljord and Shadow Isles are the control regions too.
They actually have like the highest. I calculated the average cost of all the followers in a region for a Bandle tree, so that you can know which one is like on average expensive and less expensive. And Freljord was by far the most expensive, or had the most expensive average follower with like 4.18. Next was Demacia, and actually the lowest average cost is Targon, because Targon has a lot of Celestials, and so the late game is actually outsourced, and you can't generate Celestials with the Bandle tree, which I found pretty interesting. But PNC was around 3.5, so pretty low.
Yeah, but this also probably counts production such as no, because it's only follower. Okay.
Yes, followers, exactly. Of course, it counted like Plaza Guardian and stuff because we can't like exclude these cards, but there's a lot of followers in each region, so. So let's move on to what we would change about, or what we would try to improve on PNC as a region. And my first idea would be to make some of these engine cards like better statted, like Puffcap Peddler. I really like Puffcap Peddler Expeditions because it's a 3-mana 3/3 that's already decent enough stats. That's like there are 3-mana 3/4s in the expeditions. All other 3-drops are like 3/3s or 4/3s, and it just has a very good effect on its own. Would probably be too broken in constructed, but if you would just make Ballistic Bot a 2/2 to start or a 2/3 to start, that would just make it less bad turn you play it and make the ignition just a really good upside.
If I would make changes, I would start by changing Heimerdinger, giving him +1 health. I think this would be important change for the region and for the Heimerdinger archetype itself. since 5 health makes him more likely to survive when he played on curve, and then you can play like a 6-cost spell, big one, most likely Remembrance, because this is how you should combine Heimerdinger. I would like also to look for changes in followers to make to get some good on curve followers, because I think all of the regions should have good on curve options, and I think all of the regions should have 3 mana 3/4, and I would look this way and change Patrol Wardens into a 3/4. I think this would be this would be a change that would help faster strategies within the region to make to get work, and I would also try to change, of course, buckets to show bad cards less and good cards more, because this is important to not having to see the counterfeit copies or advanced intel in buckets, and maybe some more of the fun cards like University of Piltover. This would be cool to see.
So PNZ actually does have a 3 mana 3/4, the Volunteer Elnuk.
Oh yeah.
And this is actually a topic of discussion that we had when it first got previewed, and we were trying to calculate whether this is actually a good thing for PNZ or not. And it depends on kind of which Elnuks it tries to slot into the deck. Time has passed, and what we found is that, or the stats suggest that Volunteer Elnuk is not a very good card in PNZ. And I mean, you can theorize about why that is. Maybe it's because it doesn't fit in with the plan. Maybe because on average, a random Elnuk is not what you want in that deck. Maybe because the archetype, I think it goes into the cloning one, is not particularly strong. But yeah, it does actually have a 3 mana 3/4.
Yeah, and I absolutely hate this card from a design perspective. I would find it really boring if every region had a 3 mana 3/4. That would just make every region the same, basically. We could just include like common cards, how they're called in Hearthstone, like the cards that every region has access to. How are they called?
Neutrals?
Neutrals, exactly.
Yeah.
And that would just be very boring for me, and I really like that some regions have bad stats but good removal, other regions have good stats but bad removal, and it would just break like the fundamental design of the game for me if they just like everybody gets a 3/4 for 3, and everybody gets a 3/2 for 2. Yeah, and I really didn't like Volunteer Elnuk, and I think it turns out it's actually a downside. There are only 3 Elnuks in the game, and it's this one, the Freljord 4 mana 5/4, 4 mana 4/5. Yeah, 4 mana 4/5 and the 5 mana 3/3. Those are all of the Elnuks. So if you put the 5 mana 3/3 into your deck, it's actually a terrible card to draw. And in the later game, I wouldn't actually want to draw a 4 mana 4/5 either. And especially not another 3/4 that just puts another 3/4 into my deck. So I would say this effect is on average a downside. And that's why this card is like okay-ish, but I still don't like the PNC getting like a 3 mana 3/4. And same problem I had with the, how's it called, the Vandal City card, that got nerfed recently, the Aloof Travelers. It was a 3/4 as well, and was just really strong, and everybody complained about it being too big, and they actually changed it.
This was broken, to be fair. This was broken.
Yeah.
On the point of balancing the buckets, I agree that given that this is a below average region, I would want to see the buckets have more better cards in there and less worse cards in there. Something else that I've thought about in terms of tweaking that Riot actually has in their arsenal is they can actually increase the cohesiveness and the wild pick bonus. And what these things are is the cohesiveness basically says how quickly the archetype gets removed from the pool of options for wild picks if your deck doesn't match the cards in that archetype, which means some of the more synergistic archetypes will just get removed more quickly if they know that your deck isn't supposed to be that archetype. Whereas with the wild pick bonus, what that means is that the archetype will show up more often than normal in wild picks if it's the primary archetypes if you've been selecting cards from. So, for example, with they know that if you've got a lot of traps, then even in the wild picks, they will give you more traps, for example. And as I mentioned, PNZ is a high synergy for region, which means that they would benefit higher by tweaking these bonuses up. Now, some of these stats is already quite high, but I think they could probably do better with increasing as well. So I think that is one way of kind of streamlining PNZ so that it doesn't end up trying to, or one deck doesn't try to do 3-4 different things. It will end up only doing kind of 1 or 2 things, very streamlined, and find those synergies a lot more effectively.
Can go over the top as well though. Like I had plenty of Teemo decks with like 8 or 9 Puffcat Peddlers, and that just felt broken as well. Just play Puffcat Peddler, Puffcat Peddler, Puffcat Peddler, and way better deck than Constructed could ever have. And with the lower amount of cards in the deck, those I had like 3 of these with like 9 Puffcat Peddlers. We just went 7-0 pretty easily. Same with Syrian Sump Workers, when those were like offered quite a lot. I saw people with like 12 or 13 of those in the deck, and it just gets ridiculous at some point. Maybe you would have to change the maximum amount of cards in each deck, or like the same card in each deck.
Well, let's see with Teemo's traps. Shroom and Boom, the cohesiveness is very high and wild pick bonus is high. So we can see how effective that is with what you said, which is you can get many duplicates of the key cards that you want. So that's one of the reasons why I think the traps can actually succeed. Whereas, for example, maybe another archetype that isn't as strong, headlined by a different champion, maybe those cohesiveness and the wild pick bonus isn't as high, and by increasing it, you can actually advantage it to the level that you mentioned with the Teemo archetype. It could be equally strong because it doesn't have to pick from the wild picks that is not synergistic with that archetype. Make every champion into Teemo, basically. So.
So this is basically Riot should use this more often. This weapons that they have available, cohesiveness and synergy and wild pick synergy, and if they will tweak this more often, not only by increasing synergy in PNZ, but also decreasing synergy and changing cohesiveness in other regions. This could make an interesting gameplay. I would like to see this changes often, so we can really expect how high are the stats at any given moment.
Should just have to start each Demacia draft with 5 times Vanguard Lookout, and
that
would be a decent nerf. Okay, so is there anything else you want to add, or should we move on to the individual champions? Seems like nothing. So let's just jump into these individual champions. As you can see on this screen, I pulled up all these buckets, and we can talk about the champions in their respective buckets. And I think we can just do it like alphabetical and start with like Caitlyn. And this is the newest archetype built around traps, and it's paired with Teemo. Sadly, this Teemo still doesn't appear in expeditions, and it's supposed to use both sides of these traps, the puff caps and the flash bombs, to get like the big effects going off, either the Teemo puff cap kill or the Caitlyn flip and the strike with the big damage. To be honest, I've never really liked Caitlyn. She seems like just a weird unit. She puts these traps into the deck, wants to be aggressive, but the traps aren't aggressive at all. They just like destroy your opponent's minions, and this isn't really something a really aggressive deck wants to do. I don't care about how big my opponent's board set is if I try to kill them. So, I mean, she's decent, she deals some damage and can be surprising for your opponent if they attack into her and you had like 5 to 6 flash bomb traps and then they just die to her striking. But overall, I don't think she makes a lot of sense as a champion as a whole.
I would say you are in a minority saying that you don't like Caitlyn, since actually, according to Balco data, Caitlyn is 5th most played champion in expeditions, which is overall, which is like when I saw this, I thought it's insane. She loses only to Poppy, Shyvana, Senna, and Veigar in this category, and so she's really popular across the whole expeditions. And as she say when she levels up, practice, as they say, makes perfect. But I'm not sure if this is true in this scenario, because Caitlyn has like average win rate in expeditions. She's probably like below average champion, but she's a great design success, because this is about balance in expeditions, because this is the dream from a designer perspective. Champion that is below average and highly played is something that designers wants to do every time. So this is what I would say the start about Caitlyn, that this is a great design success, I would say.
Maybe one thing to add, Balco's data is from a month ago, and we still did offering bonus, so we were just offered Caitlyn a lot more than other champions, which is like probably one of the reasons. Like Shyvana and Veigar and Senna, I think you said, were all offered more. So of course people play them more if they get them offered more. I don't like we should need
I didn't know
that.
that there was an offer bonus for Caitlyn. I didn't feel that when I played Expeditions 3, that I have Caitlyn offered a lot.
It was for all the new Battle City champions and for all the cards that are combined with Battle City, so Caitlyn and Veigar and stuff like that. Or am I like Arthur? You have the data right on this, right?
Yes, the offering bonuses increase whenever new champions are introduced. So Caitlyn, along with all of the new champions, would have gotten a buff as well.
I think it got changed, so now it's like balanced, and you can see every champion. And you would have to look at how the distribution is now, if Caitlyn is still played a lot, or if she falls off a little bit more. But first, Arthur, what is your opinion on Caitlyn?
So Caitlyn, when she was first spoiled, I thought she would be stronger. I thought activating 5 traps off board is very strong, and I thought she would be stronger with Teemo. However, her win rate stats has not been very impressive. She's, I guess, average within PNZ, but as we said, PNZ is already below average, so Caitlyn has not been incredibly strong. I still think she's fairly well designed, but I think the main problem with her is that the support cards for her in her archetype is not particularly strong. They are incredibly high synergy, and flash bomb traps, even though they are random, they're also random to a point where a lot of some of the times they do almost nothing, in the sense that some of the time they're great because they have a 2-1, a flash bomb hits, and it hits exactly that 2-1 and you clear a blocker. But other times, you know, it could be doing 2 damage to a 4-3 that was going to trade off anyway, or sometimes their board is empty and the flash bomb traps still activate and do nothing. And the fact that it's not very predictable makes it very difficult to play with. Whereas Teemo's mushroom traps it's just always Nexus damage, which is always welcome. You know exactly where what direction that game is going towards. So I think Caitlyn is designed fine. I just think her supporting cards deserve a bit of a buff in expeditions anyway. A lot of them are just too high synergy. And yeah, I think it's mostly down to the mechanics of flash bombs and the supporting cards.
So which card would you like buff in particular? Because I really like Sting Office in expeditions. I've lost to this card multiple times, and it's just a 2 attack elusive, which just randomly kills stuff on your board. I think Sting Officer is very strong, and not sure which other card you want to buff. Maybe the Officer Squad, the 5-mana 4/5, or like Advanced Intel, which is like obviously unplayable.
Yeah, to 0 mana.
Yeah, some of those cards, or maybe even remove some of the cards that don't really just are not particularly strong from that bucket will be enough. So
They would
because
remove like insider knowledge and most wanted, for example, or
yeah,
ambush.
I'm less looking at buffs and nerfs because I wouldn't expect Riot to buff and nerf too many cards for specifically for expeditions, because what it will do is it will impact constructed in potentially unintended ways as well. Some of these cards are not played in constructed anyway, so it might actually have no impact. Card I'm thinking of for that is like the Shurima Reputation 6/4 that got a bit of a buff before. Callous Bone Crusher. But obviously, if they change the bucket in terms of removing or adding cards, that has zero impact on constructed. So they can do that as much as they want to balance expeditions whilst keeping constructed exactly in the same spot as they are. And I find that to be maybe a more effective way of balancing expeditions.
But I would say that Teemo and Caitlyn don't make much sense together. And we've seen it in Constructed as well, that Caitlyn is more of a mid-range card that just tries to control the board, attack over and over, combines fine with Draven, for example. But Teemo is a very combo-y card. We just try to kill them, stall out, and then eventually dive into half caps. So I don't think they are really fitting well together. And
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I think Teemo is like more of a combo-ish card, and Caitlyn is just a threat that can work the best in mid-range deck. As for the buffs, I would clearly want to buff Advanced Intel, because this card is so embarrassing when you look at this bucket, and I would like it to be 0 mana. So for 0 mana it would actually be playable if you want to make Caitlyn good, I think. And also, yeah, you can remove some of the bad cards from the bucket, or maybe try to pair both Teemo and Caitlyn with some other champion to better complement playstyles of both, I think.
yeah, I would really like for example, Caitlyn and Twisted Fate deck focused on card draw.
Yeah.
And or just like basically we have a card draw bucket right now, which is Vi and Twisted Fate, which doesn't make really much sense because like Caitlyn just has insider knowledge, for example, and you could like flip Twisted Fate really fast with like 2 insider knowledge. That would be fun. Or just trigger these flash bombs, and Twisted Fate also helps with board control, with just dealing with all of these leftover units. That would be like more synergistic than Teemo, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's true. Of course, Teemo is synergistic because of traps. Poison Puffcups count as traps, but this is the difference in archetypes. So you just use Poison Puffcups in Caitlyn deck only as activator for Caitlyn, and not really to develop your game plan. If you build around Caitlyn.
Okay, so that's Caitlyn. Let's just move on to Ekko. And Ekko is, I think, one champion that really suffers from bad buckets. He lives in 2 buckets. One time is paired with Pyke, which is the lowest win rate champion in expeditions, as far as I know. And like this bucket doesn't just make any sense. You just lurk stuff and can open it up quickly. You have like, let's call it predict lurkers, and you have like random lurk cards and random predict cards, and try to combine those 2 into one thing. That just never made sense and doesn't make any sense. You're just like trying to reshuffle more lurkers into a deck with your practical perfectionist, only to then maybe hit lurk at some point. that archetype is just, I don't know who designed this. The more reasonable archetype would be the Time Lords with the Cillian. I actually lost to this deck and constructed once. It was embarrassing. But this one has like a decent mid-range plan where you have the Ekko that flips into the rallies, and then you can just play a lot of units and make your hand not run out of cards with Cillian. At some point you just attack them like 3 times and kill them. And I found that to sometimes work out, but it's still a very combo-y playstyle. You need a lot of predict to make that work. And Ekko in general is like suffering under his bad stats. He's a 4 mana 4/2. It's basically like with quick attack. He's basically what's he called? The Bandle City follower, the Arena Kingpin, and he's just costing 1 mana more for creating these fleeting time tricks. And those are just really bad stats. So if they would increase Ekko's stats a little bit more to maybe a 4/3, he would be really strong in expeditions, but just like that, he can't be considered a very strong champion.
Yeah, because this change would be cool, especially because if in Time Lords you have not time because you have in Ekko bucket some good cards. You have like Mystic Shot, there is Gacha, there is Patrol Wardens. There are some pretty good cards. There is also Thermogenic Beam in the Pike bucket. So this change would be helpful to make Ekko as a standalone threat in some other deck as a second supporting champion.
The problem with Ekko and Expeditions, I think, is that the predict keyword is not particularly suited for Expeditions. He has a still fairly bad win rate, below 50% at the moment even, despite receiving a slight buff earlier that we predicted, pun intended, to not have too much effect on his win rate. And the reason is because prediction, how that works is that you ideally would like to put situational cards in your deck which have varying effectiveness, as in strength, maybe, some cards that are 1 out of 10, some cards that are 10 out of 10 in your deck. And then you can predict your way to the 10 out of 10s more effectively. Whereas in Expeditions, you are often trying to build a deck which has a very high average win rate. A lot of the time, you are trying to put 5 out of 10, 6 out of 10, 7s into your deck. And being able to predict which out of the 5, 6, 7 doesn't give you as much of a bonus. Whereas in Constructed, where you can put in the more situational silver bullets, being able to predict for them is a lot more effective. That coupled with the fact that predict isn't particularly reliable in Expeditions, in the sense that you can't get that critical mass of it as easily, and the fact that it's quite conservatively costed in that all of the predict cards are fairly understated or overcosted, means that Ekko isn't particularly strong right now, despite it being able to level up off the board. So I think that's the problem with Ekko at the moment.
Yeah, to summarize this, Ekko is bad before leveling up, before flipping, and it's really hard to flip. And even after flip, it's not like great. It's good. It can win you the game, but it's really hard to get to that point.
You need a lot of, you need Shurima basically the second region, because PNC only has 2 predict cards in total, Time Trick and Perfectionist. And so you're basically, if you pick Ekko as your first champion, you're forced into picking Shurima as second champion. If you see like a Rek'Sai, you just regret your life choices, because you then have like random lurkers in your deck. And I think it would really help if they put just 1 more predict card or 2 more predict cards into PNC. Just a 2-mana 2/2 predict with Augment, for example. That would be a cool card. Why 5 mana 3/4 with predict? That would make sense.
Give them Aspiring Chronomancer, right?
Yeah, but that would be too good stat. It has to be like a 2/2 with Augment. Otherwise, I don't like the card. PNC shouldn't have a 2/3.
Okay.
That's my point. Like, they have Ballistic Bot, but it's a 1/3. Okay.
So we can agree that Ekko is gonna be the worst champion that we are discussing today.
As a standalone champion, probably, yes. By the win rate, Arthur?
By win rate, Vi is actually lower than Ekko, but by a tiny amount.
I think like Vi is such a bad bucket. We can talk about that.
It's mega different in Balco data. I don't know if this changed a lot, because like Ekko is 9th worst card, 9th worst champion according to win rate in Balco, and Vi is like 14th best. So this is like super different in Balco. Do you have any ideas why it could be the reason why this is a big difference?
I don't really want to speculate, because then we're kind of just discussing Balco versus Lord Guardian, and yeah.
Okay, I think that would be like a subject for a different video and would like lead too far. Basically, like for
That's
the
true.
viewers that don't know what this actually is, Elo Guardian is an app that tracks specifically expeditions,
Mhm.
and Balco is just a collection, like the person named Balco made from all the Masters players playing expeditions. And it was Balco's dated like a month ago. Elo Guardian is like up to date, and I think they have a different track rate as well. I think
Yeah,
Balco is like in hand or in play, or I don't know exactly.
Balco is in deck, I think, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and Lord Guardian is in hand.
Okay,
Yeah.
but I don't think a discussion about which is better here would really bring us forward with how PNC can
Yeah.
be improved. Okay,
That's true.
so let's move on to the next champion here. Let's cover the four course champions first with Jinx. And Jinx is one of the Jinx is probably my favorite designed champion after Puffcaps. Like favorite design in PNC is Puffcaps, and afterwards it's Jinx. Because if you just look at her from a design perspective, she seems so broken. She's an aggressive card that just gives an aggressive region card draw and just refuels your hand over and over while giving you face damage as well. And I really like this card, and I was amazed by when I saw her first because she just makes so much sense and is so powerful. And I really like her in expeditions as well. You sometimes mill out because of your low deck size, but I still really enjoy playing Jinx. The archetype is very weird. It's a very aggressive curve, basically just 1, 2, 3, 4 drops and some random epics. So you're really forced into a very aggressive archetype, but I like to play Jinx in many archetypes just as a 4-mana 4/3 quick attack, sometimes flipping her, and if you flip her and be aggressive, then that's great, that's an upside, but just a 4-mana 4/3 quick attack is very strong on her own.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I mean that stat line always suggested could fit easily onto Ekko, and Jinx is quite considerably has a higher win rate than Ekko, and I think that's part of the reason why. As I mentioned before, there's just a lot of 2-1, a lot of 2-1 challenges that will be able to get Ekko on the crackback. I also think Jinx is quite well designed in the sense that you can try and go for the discard strategies, but I actually prefer just playing her as a solid 4-drop that actually scales well into the late game, because if you're playing with a lot of low drops, eventually you will empty out your hand even without any discard strategies, and then she can level up and start getting her you card advantage without even necessarily forcing herself into the discard synergies, which might be not as easily reliable. So a strong mid-range champion that scales well into the late game is pretty good.
Yeah, I agree. I also like to play Jinx that way, just as a format for 3 quick attack. Making yourself into a linear aggro deck to dump your hand as quickly as possible, and then Jinx is gonna get killed, and you don't have any game plan after that. So it's better to probably take a slower approach. And then Jinx can be pretty good. For me, Jinx is below average champion. I don't. It's not like I like her design that much. She's cool, but there are many better champions and cooler ones.
Okay, like Jinx as Kindred are pretty hard to play. There are like a lot of random stuff, random optimizations you can make with Jinx. For example, if you have her not leveled up and have 2 cards in hand, one of which is Sump Dredger, then you discard 1 card, Jinx flips over because she sees your hand being empty, you draw a card, and actually the flipped side of Jinx is like a new entity. So if you play the last card from your Sump Dredger draw, you get another Mega Death Rocket. So in the same turn where you flip her, you can actually get the rocket if you play like a Pogo Cannons or a Sump Dredger. And similar with Kindred, that you can kill 2 units in 1 turn, because the flipped Kindred can mark a unit again, even if the other Kindred already killed a unit. So there's a lot of small optimization, and I think Jinx is a very high ceiling, a high skill champion, because it really depends on whether you want to empty your hand out and basically be top deck mode if she gets killed, or just want to keep her on the board and preserve her value for later.
I'm not sure if that's true. If you play her in a mid-range deck and just eventually run out of cards, it's not highly skill testing. And if you want to try to make an aggro deck in a different strategy, it's a very linear deck then, so it's also probably not very skill testing, I would say. I don't agree that Jinx is very skill testing as a card.
Well,
In
there's
expeditions, at least.
discard aggro, like the old discard aggro with Draven and Jinx was regarded as one of the hardest decks to play and constructed. And this is mainly because of
Draven is very skill testing card, I would say.
Yeah, but Jinx as well. Like, you have to think about when you play Jinx, if they can kill her, if you can safely flip her, or like she get killed, how you can utilize doing the same rocket in a turn, basically with the Poe Cannon, Thumb Dredger, with the Augmented Experimenter, just flipping your hand over. And this was a high risk thing to do, because if they just kill your Jinx in response, then you lose. So.
You convinced me a little.
A little, okay, that's good. Arthur, do you think Jinx is a high skill? Like, you can't just play her as a 4-mana 4/3, then she's not very skill testing, but I would think if you would build around her, she's a little bit more skill testing. What do you think, Arthur?
I agree with that, but as I mentioned, I kind of like her just for her stats and her kit. I don't really like going into the discard synergies too much. And yes, the little nuances, little tricks are there in terms of being able to kind of sump dredger into flipping or things like that, or generating the rocket when she levels up. But those are kind of game information in that once you know it, and you can look for it. And you can often find out about it in game. For example, I found out about the rocket thing. I knew about the Sump Treasure thing, but I didn't know about the rocket thing until it came up in Path of Champions recently in Labs, because I've not been able to empty my hand, I guess, on the same turn that Jinx leveled up again before. But once you know it, and then to look for those kind of plays, I wouldn't say it's particularly skill testing. It's not a particular sequence of things which requires a lot of skill to play. It's more like, do you know this knowledge or do you not? It's a kind of a binary effect.
One of the funniest decks I had was a Jinx Nautilus deck. I took like 2 6 wins, where I basically always built up a big hand and then discarded this whole hand with the Augmented Experimenter and just hit deep immediately while flipping my Jinx and then almost drawing out. Basically only have like my 3 Nautilus copies and Riptiding over and over again till my opponent ran out of cards, like playing 2 Riptides in a turn because I couldn't kill my Nautilus. This was a really fun deck. Like, not something you think of immediately, but just card draw and Jinx. It's kind of fun. Okay, let's move on to the last 4-cost champion, Viktor. Viktor actually has 2 buckets, one with Noxus, one with Targon. The Noxus bucket is the more serious one, where you are like aggressive and attacking, whereas the other one with Zoe is kind of a meme. If you want to build around Viktor, we can take a look at the Zoe bucket first. It's called Awesome Augments with an exclamation mark. And it has like all of the random Zoe stuff and all of the augment cards, while not offering that much else. We have Jump Wump, Benefactor, some cards that create something. And favorite card, Accelerated Pursuit, which only requires 15 cards played in expeditions, so it's like a changed card for expeditions. But I would say this Viktor bucket it's pretty similar to the other one, but the other one is just better. That's why I'm going to have this open while we discuss Viktor. And this one is just very aggressive, has Puff Caps, has early game, and Get Excited, Rising Spell Force. And Viktor is a champion. He is, I would say, a pretty weird champion because he just relies on you keeping Viktor alive over and over again and play these Hex Core upgrades until he finally turns into a good unit. And the worst feeling in the game is just playing a Viktor on turn 4, augmenting, and then your opponent plays a Screeching Dragon and just kills the Viktor. And you're just like, why am I not playing Screeching Dragon?
Yeah, this is part of the reason why I wanted to Heimerdinger to 5 health because of Screeching Dragon. What and about this needing time for Viktor to scale? What is better option to give yourself time than to keep them busy with aggressive Noxus deck? This is for me, this looks like a good synergy for Viktor to actually play a lot of high attack threats from Noxus, so opponent have to spend their removal on aggressive minions rather than on Viktor later. So and then Viktor can be safer in a later portion of the game to scale to maybe gain like elusive and finish the game off.
Arthur, what is your opinion on Viktor?
I think Victor's okay now. I think he used to be worse, but he got a slight buff in that he actually generated a Hectex upgrade when he got played, which I think is a deserved buff because he was worse before. And I'm also interested in why he has gone up. I don't think it's just that. I suspect that some of the reason why Viktor has also gone up in terms of his win rate is because there's some more card creation archetypes coming in with Vandal City. So Vandal City and now some parts of Shadow Isles are now generating darkness, generating new cards. And I think that kind of makes Viktor a little bit better because you're able to create more cards and play created cards off board and even level him up off board sometimes. And I think that's the reason why he's kind of gone up from being fairly bad to fairly average now. But overall, I still think he's not that strong. It takes him some time to get going, and he's quite weak in the at the beginning. But I have definitely underestimated him before, and a fully cranked up Viktor is pretty terrifying. So yeah, I think don't underestimate him.
Yeah. And this archetype in general is pretty hard countered by a single vengeance. With Riven and Viktor, if they just like go with Riven and build up one big unit with the sword, if they just invest 10 mana into Viktor and you just vengeance it, then
I would say if you invest 7 mana into vengeance, you might just die to Noxus aggressive minions if you are gonna try to vengeance one of the threats.
That's rarely happening if you play it correctly, because like Riven and the Riven sword cost 7 mana in total as well, if they play all of the fragments and the sword. So they invested the same amount of mana, and before Viktor really gets a threat, you have to play like 2 to 3 Hexcore upgrades, and with a good control deck, you can just gain this value back or this tempo loss back in the later game. And yeah, oftentimes you just focus on Manwinier very much in this augmented assault with like Kado supporting and these fragments and the Legion Drummer giving quick attack. And if you just are able to shut down, it doesn't have to be a vengeance, it can just be like a Will of Ionia, for example. It would be more mana efficient, if not, but not permanent.
Yeah.
So
Also,
because I like playing more interactive decks, more reactive decks, I rarely face any problems with Viktor.
Yeah, this is probably part of the reason. If you play more initiative focused deck and you're gonna start losing to Noxus early game, then Viktor is a big problem probably. I want to also talk a little more about the thing that Arthur mentioned about created cards being more often in the decks right now. This is actually a very good point. I think this is part of the reason why Viktor probably going to be slowly scale up in expeditions because even right now playing Viktor as a threat in darkness is probably not a bad idea. If you have like Veigar, Viktor could be a nice combo, I think.
Maybe, yeah. I really like Viktor in like slower decks as well because of the Hexcore upgrade allowing you to pass priority for 1 or 0 mana. And oftentimes in a control deck, I just want to pass to my opponent to see what they are doing. And if I just pass, they might pass back and then attack me. But if I play a Hexcore upgrade and then in Ignition, they can just like pass and do nothing because I play that card. And if they pass, I might pass. There's like an interesting mind game going on.
Yeah.
I definitely like the design of Viktor. I think he fits him very well from his appearance and what he does in League. So just
Yeah,
improvement.
I also really like design of Viktor. Viktor is one of the fan favorites from what I heard and read on Reddit actually. So maybe we can look for some good idea to buff Viktor. What if Viktor starts with like 5 health? Would it be broken? What do you think,
It would
guys?
be very hard to balance for like these regions without good removal. Like a 2-5 that turns into a 3-5. That's basically the lecturing Yordle.
3-6, right? Yeah.
But 3-6? No, I mean like with an augment. Like you immediately get an augment trigger usually, so it's a 3-5 most of the time. And that just gets very hard to kill at some point. And it's very frustrating to play against Viktor if you can't kill him. It just takes over the game. And if you play like, I don't know, what region, like if you play Demacia Targon and fail to hit your Falling Comet, then pretty sad if your Viktor is 5 health and you can't kill them.
Yeah, you have to like concerted strike probably if you play the master.
I hate concerted strike, but talked about that before.
Okay.
I
don't have special feelings for concerted strike. I just think it's a good card.
Yeah, it's a too good card in my opinion. But that's maybe another discussion point.
Yeah, that's true.
Anything you want to add to Viktor? Would you change Viktor? Would you leave him the way he is?
Probably leave him as it is. Not every card needs to be top tier, and even if we did, there will still be some lower tier ones. So I think at the moment he's fine. Buffing his toughness would make a difference, especially when Viktor is essentially a keyword glutton, right? He will stack a lot of keywords, and unlike any other champion, which 1 point of toughness, it just means 1 point of health. Viktor could be getting regeneration, Viktor could be getting tough, Viktor could be getting fury, and the fact that he could be getting any of those keywords, which kind of compounds with his toughness, means that he will actually gain a lot out of it. That said, I don't think he would be overpowered as a 2-5 or anything like that. But I also don't think it's particularly necessary either. So
yeah. Especially if you get regeneration, it can be pretty hard to deal with.
Yeah, it would be definitely frustrating to play against if we make it to 5 and he got like a regeneration of fury or tough.
And it's already frustrating to play against if you're like, I have my vengeance in my hand and I just want to wait till next turn and then you roll Spell Shield. Or if you are like, I don't know, a Sand Soldier deck and they roll Fury immediately, it's just a lot of feels bad moments already.
Yeah.
It's not that bad, but
yeah.
a little bit feels bad.
Let's leave Viktor then as a 2-4, right? Let's leave him
exactly
this way.
Okay, 2 more champions to cover. We have the Heimerdinger and then the Great Finale. DY. Heimerdinger is in Grand Moments with Lux and basically a spell builder round. And my biggest problem with Heimerdinger is that Lux is just so much better, and I just tend to just draft around Lux if I get this Grand Moments bucket. And Heimerdinger is actually really strong constructed right now with Chase, with the Hextech augmenter thingy, making all of the turrets stronger. That's a real deck. But in Expeditions, Chase is not in, sadly. So Heimerdinger is left alone. And I really like Heimerdinger if I'm not playing Lux, for example, with like Anivia and Frostbites, and just playing these big expensive spells. In general, he's a little bit of a confused champion, I would say, because he made way more sense when his elusive turret were at 3, then it would just like build a big elusive board and hit them. But people complain too much about that, and now he gets fearsome turrets at the elusive at 6. So he's a little bit weaker, I would say.
I think the switch from 3-1 to 6-1 was a nerf to him, and they intended him as such. But what do you think about the fact that we now have a 5-mana 2-4 that makes 6-1 elusives versus the 5-mana 1-3 that made 3-1 elusives? Because essentially he got a nerf and then a buff, but I'm not sure on that if he's better or worse.
But it's like a riot buff, where they don't know how to buff up champion properly and just give him random stats. And like that's just always what they do. They just put one stats there and remove one stat there. But like the real issues with the archetype are not addressed. So I don't think this buff is really that much of a difference. A deck that wants to kill Heimerdinger always kills Heimerdinger unless you protect him some way. And a deck that can't kill Heimerdinger will lose to it at some point, or will just kill you before your Heimerdinger comes online.
I think a 1/3 is actually significantly easier to kill than a 2/4 actually.
Mhm.
And his stats now is actually very high. According to Lord Guardian, he's the highest win rate PNC champion, and I'm not too surprised by that. I like Heimerdinger. I used to play him quite a lot back in the base expansion. Partly because he worked with Accelerated Pursuit, and that was a very fun deck. Obviously, as the number of archetypes have increased, Accelerated Pursuit is less likely to come up now, so I don't see that deck coming up very much. Also, there's more ways of dealing with Catastrophe. But overall, I still think he's quite a fun deck and a fun champion, and building around him, he is a threat that needs to be removed off the board. Even if the opponent doesn't know how many spells you have in your hand, the fact that you could just kind of progress day into a free 8/8 is pretty terrifying. Heimerdinger's champion spell being progress day is pretty great. 8/8 at practically burst speed. So he essentially gives spell decks a level of inevitability where once you have Heimerdinger, you can just generate turrets and block with them until you generate enough turrets to attack with them. And I think that's exactly what he's designed for, and he does that fairly well.
Yes, yes, he helps with supporting a slower strategy. But I think very important to do with Heimerdinger is try to go to Demacia to get this remembrances, because this is the best card in the bucket, and this is what keeps the bucket going. And then you can, as Conan suggested, pick Lux later, potentially if you get offered, and build around Lux and have Heimerdinger as a bonus threat in a deck. I also really like Heimerdinger design, and I think this slow game plan that Arthur described is what suits him the best, generating enough blocker to survive, and then enough turrets to finally attack. And there are a lot of good stuff in this bucket. So I'm also not very surprised that Heimerdinger is not a bad champion. I like him. He's for me he's above average, and he also sees constructed play. So he's definitely on a good side. Even right now, even without this one half buff that I still want, because this would make Heimerdinger survive a Screeching Dragon attack.
Very interesting. I don't find this bucket of him very strong. Like, we can take a quick look at it.
I mean Demacia side.
Okay, the Demacia side. Then the Demacia side is strong. The PNC side has like Used Cask Salesman and Golden Crush Bot, which you don't want in your deck, and like Hextech Transmogulator. I like the Demacia side as well, obviously, but yeah, I feel like Heimerdinger is, from the champions that are designed to be slow, Heimerdinger is just the weakest. If you look at a Nautilus, a Teemo, a Karma, a Anivia, they are just like way better at winning the late game than Heimerdinger. Heimerdinger, of course, creates random turrets, but if you get hit by giant sea monsters, it doesn't really help you. If you die to mushroom shrooms, it doesn't really help you. Maybe I played him too little. Like, that could be as well. I didn't play him that much.
But I mean, against sea monsters, you probably want to play your turrets faster and try to kill them before they go deep, right? As Heimerdinger.
Yeah, but like they.
And not like try to win a late game, because Heimerdinger try to win a late game faster, earlier than the ultimate late game cards like Anivia, like Aurelion Sol, or like Nautilus.
Yeah, you can try that, but like Nautilus is like very, it's like a combo deck, I would say. If you hit deep reliably on turn 7, 8, you just like always win the game. And there's nothing Heimerdinger can do about that. But I can see him being strong in expeditions. I just think about against the decks he is strong. Like against mid-range decks, they will usually have an answer for him. Like a Concerted Strike, a Screeching Dragon, and you need to really put in effort to protect your Heimerdinger. If you play like Demacia and Barriers, or Ionia and Recalls, or Freljord with Frost Bites, then he can be very strong, but just throwing him into like a mono PNC deck, for example, would be pretty terrible.
That's true, that's definitely the case.
Okay, I will definitely test out Heimerdinger more once I get him offered. Again, I usually just draft Lux and swap Heimerdinger for Vi, for example, and just have like a good Lux deck. But I'm sad for him. I really like he's prismatic, and it's like one of the most satisfying prismatic cards because if you like go back and forth, it's just I really like the sound of that. Yeah. That leaves us with Vi, and as I saw, she has a major role in Arcane. And she is a pretty good champion, I would say. Just like a worse Screeching Dragon, unless you have her in the opening hand. At which point the question is, do you keep Vi in your opening hand or do you mulligan her away? She's a pretty bad top deck. Like not a terrible top deck, but you really need to have her in the hand to grow. And she seems like a little bit of an outdated, like not outdated champion, she's still strong in expeditions, but Vi is capped at +8/+0. If you have Narcissus stacking infinitely, why can't you have Vi stacking infinitely as well? That would be way cooler. And the main problem is her bucket. It's just like a lot of random stuff. I see that Jury Rig and the Rummage. Why is there that Trail of Evidence? Vault Break is a terrible card. And of course, the Twisted Fate side was randomly nerfed as well. I think the main reason why Bilgewater has such a low win rate right now is because they just randomly nerfed all of the Bilgewater buckets. Like putting loaded dice into it and I don't know, just random cards. And Boom Crew Rookie, the Labs special, but pretty bad in real formats. So.
Yeah, about One Girl Wrecking Crew, about Vi, what I'm gonna say, according to Balko, she has the strongest win rate, the highest win rate out of all the PNZ champions, and it's not only strong in terms of PNZ, it's like 14th win rate in all of the Balko data. So so I'm gonna risk saying that Vi stands for victory. About meritoric aspect, I think Vi is best if you try to abandon her bucket. And first of all, you never go into Bridgewater with Vi. You don't want this bad Bridgewater cards, and then. And then you try to mostly abandon the side of Piltover and her bucket and try to build around another champion and play Vi just as a single threat. You always keep Vi in opening hand, I think. Or it's always, it's very often, right? It's the cases that you don't want to do that are not happening very likely. I think she's mega flexible. She fits into almost every deck because she can be both a threat on the top of an aggressive deck, because as an aggressive deck, you're probably gonna play cards and dump your hand. So she's going to be, when you play her on turn 5, she's going to be quite close probably to flip right at the VAT. And sometimes you can just buff her attack with some bonus card. In my run that I mentioned earlier, when I played almost full Shurima and 3 Piltover cards with Vi, I flipped Vi 4 times, and 3 of them was when I played Shapestone on her, so to make her 10 attack. So this can happen in aggro deck. You can play her also in control deck, especially the challenger keyword helps with that, because she can remove some other champion that is otherwise problematic, so she can work as a removal. She's also good on curve in a mid-range deck, because if you play mid-range deck, you probably reliably can have Vi as a 5 mana 5/4 when you play her on 5. And if this has Challenger and Tough, this is a little even better than Screeching Dragon. You can kill Screechy and Vi survives 1v1. So I think she's mega flexible, and this is the reason why she's very good. And for me, it's the best Piltover champion, actually.
I'm interested in seeing what Valko's data would say on a refresh. I'm quite surprised it's so high because, according to Lord Guardian, it's the lowest win rate champion in PNZ. I don't think Vi is particularly strong. I'm not sure if she's necessarily the lowest either, but as Kona mentioned, I think that she doesn't compare very well to Screeching Dragon or Swiftwing Lancer, which is another 5 mana challenger as well. The play pattern that I've seen with Vi is often Vi challenges someone, trades off, and attempts a 2-for-1. And then Vi gets killed off with another by the opponent's challenger or with a kill spell or something, and then that's it, a 2-for-1. But a lot of the other kind of less rare cards, challenges can offer that kind of thing, and for a champion, it's often just not quite good enough. That plus the fact that Vi is not that reliable at being a 5/4 all the time. I also think that most of the time, almost all the time, you should be keeping Vi in your opening hand, despite being a 5-drop. But I generally don't like keeping 5-drops in my hand, but I think with Vi, you should. She's a terrible top deck, so I think that contributes to why, for me, I don't think she's a particularly strong champion.
Her flip is also terrible. Just to mention that Vault Breaker just giving you +2/+0 for 3 mana. It's just not. You're not happy if you draw multiple V's.
Yeah. The Vault Breaker is not a great card, and hoping for a scenario when you can put like three Vault Breakers on an elusive is not a great idea.
But it's actually a really interesting discussion if Vi is better or Screeching Dragon, because I actually think as well that Screeching Dragon is better. For example, today I played Screeching Dragon, I killed a 3/2, and then it was a 5/3, and then I actually had a chance to have a 0/3 lying around with like a random random generated, and I killed the 0/3. It grew up into a 6/4, and then I killed another 3/2, grew up into a 7/2, and then I killed something big with it to finish it off.
This is unlikely scenario, honestly.
It's not that unlikely, and you can kill infinite 1/1s with it, or 1-attack units with Screeching Dragon. You can kind of do it with Vi as well, but she doesn't grow. And she also takes up a champion slot, so that's a big thing.
She does grow, actually. She does grow, and she finally hit for 5 to Nexus every time he kills someone.
And
she does grow every card you play.
Yes, but every card you play. But the Screeching Dragon, if you play like a Concerted Strike, if you play some cards like that, if you hit with a barrier, it keeps growing. And actually not that likely for Screeching Dragon to just kill 3/2s and die, because you're just playing it badly if you just do that. Usually Screeching Dragon can kill like 3 cards at least, or even 4 cards, before it finally goes down. And Vi usually can't. Like, she isn't getting this health back.
I think comparing the two, I would say on average, a Screeching Dragon will get you a 2-for-1, and that's very good for a common creature, a follower. Vi, I think, would do something similar, will also get you a 2-for-1, which would normally be considered to be quite good as well. But the fact that she's a champion means that she needs to be compared to other champions, which is why I think Screeching Dragon is a very strong common follower, whereas Vi is not that strong of a champion. So I think that's where the difference is. We need to ask for more out of our champions, and I think Vi, relative to champions, is not as strong as Screeching Dragon is relative to other creatures, followers.
That's a good comparison point.
This is a good point, because if we bring one very synergistic champion, and we can choose one champion that is anti-synergistic with it and Vi. Vi is much better, because if you have highly synergistic deck, you want to have a deck that helps the game plan, and Vi as a 2-for-1 is really good in that deck, better than a champion that requires a build around and is from a different side of the spectrum and wants to do something else.
Yeah, but like I don't really like playing Vi in like just a normal mid-range deck, as I am not happy with it. If I just play like 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop, she's a 5/4, and that's like basically a rare like Swiftwing Lancer. I really like her more if I like can actually play multiple cards, have some card draw. She's just like so average.
It's also the Ancient Yeti problem of she's at her best if you have her from the opening hand, but even if you draw her, say, on turn 3, turn 4, turn 5, or later on to top in top deck, she's really quite bad. So I think that's part of the problem.
To make Vi okay, you need to play at least 2 cards before you play her, or when she's on the board, to make her okay. So so it's a little bit better than we think, probably, because even if you play Vi on 5, but you don't you have attack token and full 5 mana, then you have turn 6, and you can play like 1, sometimes 2 cards to make her grow enough to kill, to challenge something off the board, some champion that you want to remove.
It
But
can
yeah,
happen, but
she's terrible as a top deck. That's true. She's this is the worst part of the card.
and can we also mention that she doesn't fit PNC at all? Like challenging is nothing PNC is doing, striking is nothing PNC is doing, tough is nothing PNC is doing. Yeah, face damage like sometimes, but also combat tricks, nothing PNC is doing. If I was like a Demacia champion, she would just be way stronger and way more consistent. But they went full flavor here and doesn't fit PNC at all.
Yeah, no, I agree with that fully.
Okay. So as a conclusion, we could see that all of these PNC champions need a little bit of a setup, and maybe as a finisher, which PNC champion do you like the most from these? I like I'd probably just say I'm liking Jinx the most, because she's the best design and also the most playable in the most archetypes. Obviously, my favorite PNC champion in general would be Teemo, but from these, if I had to choose, I would choose Jinx as my favorite.
Out of these, I probably like Heimerdinger the most. I remember playing with him a lot back in the base core set, and yeah, I always thought him to be quite fun. An inevitable threat on its own. So
For Myzrael, it's just going to be Vi, I guess.
When I started playing, I used to like Jinx the most. I like big rockets and hitting Nexus for a lot of damage. But when I started playing, and when I was playing more, I started to like Vi more. When I was playing her in expeditions in the speedruns, she was helpful. She was cool. And therefore, from these champions, I like Vi the most.
Okay. So to finish this podcast, we do our typical cracker pack run, where I will just start up a expedition now. Gauntlet is closed again. And let's see which champions we can actually choose from here. And we have, this one will be
Easy.
Easy, yes. Like, Arthur, do you want to read the cards again, or something else do this today?
Sure. So from the left, I think Swain is fairly mediocre in expeditions. He is not that easy to hit with just fearsome. And the level up criteria is kind of difficult to do with good spells. Easy to do with bad spells, but difficult to do with good spells. Again, even after he flips, it's still not that easy to get him to Nexus Strike, which means that he can't be relied upon. Death Lotus, the spell afterwards, is pretty bad. It's almost unplayable. It's supposed to work with the Crimsons and the kind of Freyald one, but it's really quite bad. And then Imperial Demolisher, Demolitionist is unfortunately not as good as I expected her to be. It turns out that in expeditions, just doing 1 point to an ally to deal 2 to the enemy nexus is often not a good trade-off. And the 2 mana 2/3 stat line is not that great. It's fine, but it's not ideal. And often she's probably just better as a 2 mana 2/3 without having the play effect. Actually, something. So, are you able now to cancel that play effect, or do you have to deal that 1 damage now?
No, you can cancel it as far as I know. Like I tested it with Oblivious Islander and with like some Dredger, and I think you can cancel it. I'm not 100% sure, but with all the other cards, you can.
Okay. If they've kept it for so long, maybe it isn't meant to. This was something new, I think, and before there were times when I didn't really want to do it with Demolitionist. So maybe in the future I can just skip it if possible. Maybe I'll try and test that.
Okay.
So the next ones, Incubators and Talia is pretty much unplayable, I would say. Even though she got a bit of a buff, her stat line's a bit better. I don't think Talia is a very strong champion, and the archetype is not particularly strong. So I would almost disregard it on that. Within that bucket, Desert Naturalist is pretty understated. It's worthwhile if you can destroy one of their landmarks, or if you can destroy one of your landmarks. That is cheap to make the Grumpy Rock Bear, but it requires quite a lot of kind of variance or luck to get that to happen. So it's not very easy to rely upon. And Salt Spire is also pretty bad, just in general in terms of rate. So I think this is probably the worst of the three lines. The last one, the World Travelers, Bandle City is strong, and Tristana is strong. She even got a buff recently. She's kind of fairly easy to make work in that a lot of the multi-region cards are already pretty strong. So she doesn't need that much work before she is pretty strong. Yordle in Arms is something that works very well with Tristana and is worth building towards because unlike for Demacia, funnily enough, +4/+4 is actually quite a lot more than +3/+3. That coupled with the fact that Bandle City goes wide very easily, and the fact that it's 5 mana more than 6 means that Yordle Alarms is a surprisingly effective game end finisher. And then the last card in there is Bandle Gunners, which I don't love without Tristana, but with Tristana, and if you can go for this strategy, then if it does get the impact 4, it's pretty hard to stop because of the spell shield. Even without the impact 4, it's an 8 mana 7/7 spell shield, which is not very good rate, but it's still something that demands to be dealt with. So it's something. Ideally, I want something cheaper for this archetype, but I think I'll take it. And certainly between World Travelers and Mega Keg, with a bad Death Lotus card in there, I would take the right bucket, and I wouldn't even really consider the middle bucket here at the moment. So.
Okay, Myzrael, do you want to share your
Yeah.
opinions?
Yeah, I don't really have many things to add to this. Arthur said is all I agree with. I can only say something about Desert Naturalist. I think it's really good if you hit your own landmark, if you can set up this, but setting up this is hard. So the best probably option to set up is to play Mono Shuri, might have some disc. I don't like Swain really in expeditions. I also think it's very, very hard to make him flip. And so Tristana, one of the best champions right now, tier S, you should therefore in situation like this pick her. Even though I like Bundle Gunners even less, but I really like Yordles in Arms as a finisher too.
But we lost to Talia in our run together. Doesn't that mean that the Talia players are like more big brain than we are, and we should just follow them and just draft Talia each time?
That's a possibility. That's a possibility. Therefore, maybe we are just too small brain to play Talia.
It's actually there's a new constructed deck with there's a Naturalist and actual Bandle City with the 1 mana 2/1 that summons like the bomb, and you play the 2/1 on turn 2, and then on turn 4 you play up the bomb with there's a Naturalist and it counters Bandletree as well because the Naturalist kills Bandletree, so it's quite a strong deck right now. Wouldn't have expected that. But of course, in expeditions, Talia and Swain are pretty terrible. And I don't think Tristana is S tier or anything. I think Yordles in Arms is S tier. Yordles in Arms is the real champion in this World Travelers bucket. And I would really wish it would be an epic, would make it way more fun to play against this style of deck. Because if they just have like 2 or 3, you basically never win. But from the power level standpoint, it's clear right here. Okay, let's see who we get to pair this with. Interesting.
Looks like another easy pick.
Okay. So from the left we have Lissandra, which I think is not a particularly strong champion. If you get her on turn 3, then the Frozen Thrall probably will take quite a long time to count down. But if you don't get her on turn 3, then that will take even longer. If you don't have any way of flipping, if you don't have any way of accelerating those countdowns. If she does flip, the Watcher is now so hard to reduce down to 0 that by the time you have cast 5 allies that cost 8 more this game, then you shouldn't need the Watcher to finish the game. You should have just won the game already. So we don't have the kind of ultra control decks that you need the Watcher to really be the final kind of winning win condition in expeditions. So I don't think Lissandra is a particularly strong champion. That Stairs is pretty good. That's one of the better 8 drops that goes into that kind of Lissandra / Trundle archetype. The deal to all other units is pretty strong if they don't expect it, and the fact that you can obliterate all landmarks is okay. It's often used when you don't want to deal 2 to all other units. Sometimes it will actually be used to destroy all landmarks. I've had someone who managed to use the combo of what is it called?
Entomb, or the Buried in Ice.
Buried in Ice, yeah, the 9-mana epic buried all my creatures in ice and then obliterated them all when I thought I was going to win, and I lost that game. So, but that's an epic, and it's not as easy to combo with. But I think That Stairs is a decent win condition. You just don't want too many of them in the deck. Succumb to the Cold, I don't think is particularly strong, and it's pretty surprising how much 1 extra mana will change to Flash Freeze, where I think Flash Freeze is a very strong card. Whereas just adding 1 extra mana to it to summon the Frozen Thrall, which is not something you want on turn 4 or turn 3 anyway. Plus the fact that you usually don't even want to be succumbing on turn 3 or turn 4. You usually want to be using it in the relative late game. Makes Succumb a pretty it's not a very strong card at all. So I think this pack is nothing special. The second one, Thresh, is I think fairly average. I think over time he kind of can grow. And the fact that we're playing with Bandle City, I think, also helps as well. Bandle City has a tendency to go wide, so I think that kind of works a little in Thresh's favor. And then we have the Rekindler, which in the early game, when you only have 2 champions, it's sometimes hit and miss. I have had games where he's just a 7-mana 4/4, which is very understated. But anytime that he does actually summon a champion is pretty strong, even if he's summoning a Tristana. Obviously, you want to be reviving the more expensive champions like Thresh, but even summoning a Tristana would make him very good in terms of rate. And he'll also scale better once you pick up more champions as well. Mist's Core is a card that used to be not very good, but I think has grown a little bit. I'm not sure how well it works with Tristana and Bandle City because, as I mentioned, Bandle City teams to go wide, which means their cards are going to be relatively small. But then we do have a Bandle Gunners in the deck already, and maybe a Rekindler. So I think that is kind of averaged or just a little bit below average. I'm not a huge fan of that card, but I think it's okay. The Scrap Heap pack. So we got Draven, which recently got a nerf. I think Draven's still fairly strong, and maybe the strongest pack. Sorry, the strongest champion between the 3 at the moment. But I do think the nerf to 2 has made him considerably vulnerable to 2-1 challenges. Affectionate Poro, which is my favorite Poro in terms of art, unfortunately is not very good at all in terms of what he does on the battlefield. A 1-mana 1/1 is not kind of considerable enough to actually be almost worth a card, so I don't think it's a very good card. And then Grey Physician is also a card that I don't think is particularly strong. 2 mana 2/2 is a little bit understated, and though he's supposed to work with Scion, I don't think there's anything special about him, so I think he's just about average. For me, I think actually any of the packs are worthwhile. For example, I don't particularly like Lissandra or Succumb, and I don't really like Miss Core, and I don't really like the Poro or Grey Physician. Out of those, I probably would take the middle pack, so because I think Thresh and Rekindler are both fairly decent. But I actually think any of those 3 packs is feasible. So I don't think it's actually as easy as the first pick.
I agree with this pick not being easy, but I am on the side of right here of Draven. I think Draven synergizes well with Tristana in terms of trying to finish games quickly, being initiative focused. I think both Affectionate Poro and Great Physician are better in this potentially archetype, because Affectionate Poro can be used not only as a one drop but also as a potential 1 mana 1/1 let my minion attack because I pull off blocker, and Great Physician can help to get to the key minions, to discard like bundle gunners, to get more early game if you don't have any better play. But they're of course both probably first to trade from here. I would think about building an archetype. Draven is helpful with his burn damage possibilities. Of course, there is some merit for Trash, but I'm not sure if Shadow Eye synergizes particularly well with Bundle City. I think game plans are a little different. This could be hard during the draft when you gonna have shown Shadow Eye's packers that you don't want to see. The Rekindler is of course very strong. I think reviving Tristana is also powerful, especially if you play Rekindler on 7. You probably revive Tristana and you actually played for regions already, and you can flip Tristana right after playing Rekindler on 7. I also don't like Lissandra. I think she's not particularly good. She's too slow, and her strategy is not very good in expeditions actually. So I would go right, but I think it's close between Dragon and Trash here.
Okay, very interesting. I've recently lost to Affectionate Pogo very hard because I was playing champ role, where you basically roll 2 random champs and play against other people with 2 random champs as well. And I rolled Fizz and Zoe, and Solitary rolled Draven and Zillion. Came prepared with 3 times Affectionate Pogo and always killed my Fizz and my Zoe with it. And it was pretty sad.
That's a good strategy, I would say.
Yes, Solitary definitely outplayed me there. It was like a battle on turn 1, passing, and do a pass back to play my Zoe. It was a very fun mind game. In general, if I'm looking at these buckets, I'm always like very focused on these card buckets. The Glacial Landmarks is just trash and doesn't really do anything. These random big landmarks.
Trash is in the middle.
Yes, but trash is also trash. So this Ancient Evil bucket doesn't have any direction at all either. It's just like random I die and do stuff, and random ephemeral units. And this Scrap Heap style is actually focused around swarm decks. I would like to pick up a Vision, for example, with Tristana. I would like to pick up the Crowd Favorite. And for me, it would... I like Trash as a champion. I kind of like Rekindler if I make it to 3 wins. But I don't like the bucket, the Ancient Evil bucket at all. So I would actually join Myzrael in the aggression or initiative focused deck in the Draven here, despite me not liking Affectionate Pogo. I think it's just an awful card and never wanted to play it.
Yeah, I agree. As Arthur nicely pointed out, it's not worth a card in the deck.
Exactly, despite the beautiful artwork and the beautiful flavor text.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's going to conclude today's podcast. I hope you learned something about PNC and had as much fun as we did during this. And yeah, I will close this on this Affectionate Pogo art. Thank you for coming and thank you for listening. Goodbye.
Thanks. And
Thanks.
if you haven't
Goodbye.
watched Arcane yet, watch Arcane.
Definitely 10 out of 10. One of the best things I've ever seen.
Agreed.